Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all our viewers from around the world. My name is Alfonso Barrenechea. I'm a project manager at Solarplaza, and today for this webinar, we'll be discussing biodiversity in the solar field and leveraging solar assets for a healthier environment. With me today, we will have Tim Peschel, who's a nature conservation specialist and has his own company, Peschel Ecology and Umwelt, and Stefan Müller, the founder and COO of Enerpark. I will briefly begin with introducing the framework of this webinar. I'll start by introducing Solarplaza, a bit of what we do and what is our mission. And we'll move on to the presentation part of the webinar and then finalize with some Q&A. So to begin, a little bit about Solarplaza. Our mission is to positively impact the world by accelerating the sustainable energy transition. And this company was founded in 2004. We've organized over 150 events, both virtual and physical, in over 41 countries, and we boast a network of over 60,000 solar PV professionals. Speaking of events, the reason for this webinar is, of course, it's a prelude to our Solar Asset Management Europe conference. This will be our 8th edition. This year, we'll have to do things a bit differently, and we will be doing this event in a virtual environment in our own custom-made virtual platform. The platform opens the 2nd of November and will stay open until the 26th of November, and there will be different sessions throughout the process. And to give you a quick rundown of how this 1 month journey is going to look like, there will be custom matchmaking opportunities. The program is tailored for our virtual audience. And what this means is that in the main days, the 11th and 12th of November, we'll be having 4 hours each day of live sessions, supplemented by different networking opportunities. So to summarize, from the 2nd to the 10th of November, we will open the platform, have some exclusive content, and of course, we'll be encouraging everyone to network there, especially at the beginning, before the 11th and 12th. It's important to organize your meetings, make sure who's also part of the platform, find the contact that you're interested in making business with, and send them an invite so that you can connect at a further stage. The 11th and 12th, as I mentioned, will be the dates for the main event of the Solar Asset Management Europe, and we'll be discussing things such as bankability, warranty claims, O&M best practices, as well as asset management best practices. The week afterwards, on the 19th of November, we have a workshop on battery storage and its new developments. And afterwards, on the 26th of November, we have a workshop on repowering case studies, a particularly interesting topic in the European market as the solar assets start to age, and the question arises of what to do next. For all of you who are watching this webinar and want to attend Solar Asset Management Europe, and by using the discount code webinar50, you can get 50 euros off your virtual ticket. And this offer will only last the next 48 hours. So I strongly encourage everyone that if you're interested in participating, take advantage of this discount code. And now I'll be giving some practical notes to ensure everyone in the audience can get the most out of this webinar. And if you're having technical issues at any point, feel free to use the chat box. Additionally, if you have any questions for Tim or for Stefan at any point, please put them in the question and answer box, and we'll make sure to filter them and have all your questions answered. Finally, yes, the presentation slides will be made available afterwards. Now, a little bit about our speakers. We'll have Tim Peschel. He's a nature conservation expert with a focus on biodiversity and botany. And the second speaker and moderator for the session will be Stefan Müller. He's the founder and COO of Enerpark. He has over 20 years experience in the solar field, and some of his tasks include being responsible for for sale activities and business development. With all of this being said, I would like to invite Stefan to take the stage. Stefan, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks a lot for the nice introduction. Yeah, you see it also on the screen. My name is Stefan Müller. I'm one of the founders and COOs of Enerpark. Yeah, I'm in the business now more than 20 or nearly 25 years now. And yeah, always new topics are coming up. So our market is super dynamic. And this is what I really enjoy and what I like. And one session today about biodiversity, this is what we want to share with you. We is Tim Peschel and me, and for sure also a few other ones. Yeah, I think photovoltaic became already now, I would say, one part of the global infrastructure. We are not a small, tiny group anymore who are putting small systems on roofs. We are really the essential group at the moment in the energy transition from a pure global perspective. A lot of news which we just read are directed very clearly into that PV becomes cheaper, PV becomes more visible, and this means automatically that we have to talk about acceptance. Yeah, I mean, in a lot of countries around the world, especially Netherlands, we have not so much size like in China or in US. So the space is not so available. That means our photovoltaic plants, number one, becomes larger and becomes more visible. So I think everything is related to acceptance. And what we did in our association, the BNE from Berlin, that's a German association focusing on photovoltaic and a few other new energy forms, we ask ourselves, what is our role in the photovoltaic in this hot topic, biodiversity? I mean, there was also a lot of debates right now in the news about the European Union, that everyone is very clear and it's very obvious that biodiversity is the part of success of our climate change as well. So it's not only energy transition. And our question was in our association, again, what is our role? We always think that we are the good guys. We try to save the world. But on the other hand, we are also commercially driven. And our question was also to Tim Peschel and a few other ones in our association, what can we do to make things better? And better in the sense of, for example, we do greenkeeping. For sure, we have to cut the grass. We have to manage this. But on the other hand, what is the right moment to cut the grass? Should we leave the grass on site? Should we take it off? What can we do with this? Or when you think about the design aspects, we are a lot talking about what is the best distance between the rows. We generally do it pure commercially. So what is the ground coverage ratio? What is the best distance? What is the angle? And we always have the yield in our focus. But on the other hand, we have to look a bit deeper into it. And this is what we want to do now with Tim Peschel. So from the BNE, so the association in Germany, we decided to make a study, and then we found Tim. And Tim is today with us, and that's the reason why I do a bit more the introduction to bring the photovoltaic closer to the biodiversity and to other topics which are related to this. I would call it even a buzzword, but in a positive way. So I would like to hand over to Tim now to present us the nice slides, and I would say I've seen a lot of interesting pictures. As Alfonso mentioned, please feel free to send over the questions via the chat function so that we can moderate it a bit. And looking forward to it. And I would like to hand over to Tim. So thanks a lot.
Okay, so hello everybody from Berlin. I'm Tim, the biologist, and today I'm talking about solar parks and biodiversity. I know that might be a strange topic for some of you, at least for some of you, and there's maybe a connection that until now is mostly unknown. So before I start I have to move the slides. So I'm not able right now. Okay. So before I start with my presentation, I will give you an overview about the content of this webinar. So I start with the term biodiversity. So what does the term actually mean? And I will give you some facts concerning the so-called biodiversity crisis. To understand in how far biodiversity is connected to the way land is used and managed, I give you some information about the land use in Germany as a background information for you, easier to understand why solar parks can be an asset or can be good for biodiversity. So, and finally, I'm presenting the results of our study, Solar Parks, Profits for Biodiversity. So what is the connection between solar parks and biodiversity? Since a long time, people are concerned about the decline and loss of species and habitats. So it was recognized more and more that the conservation of biodiversity is a common concern of humankind. Finally, in 1992, It was adopted in Rio at the United Nations Conference on Environment and Development, and it is called the Convention on Biological Diversity. Until now, it has been ratified by 196 states, including the EU Commission. The convention has three main goals. Of course, the first goal is the conservation of biological diversity. The second goal is not only conservation, but also the use of its component, but the sustainable use of its components. And the third is the fair and equitable sharing of the benefits deriving from the use of the genetic resources. So the basic idea is that biological diversity can only be preserved in the long term if the opportunities and gains of it can be a benefit for all groups involved equally. In 2011, the European Union adopted their strategy to halt biodiversity loss in the EU until 2020. Obviously, the goal to stop the decline of biodiversity was not achieved. So, in this year, recently, the EU has adopted a new biodiversity strategy with the slogan, bringing nature back into our lives. So this sounds really hopeful and really nice. And Germany, in 2007, we adopted a national strategy on biological diversity. The reason for that was to integrate it into national policies. So hundreds of goals and measures were formulated for all biodiversity related topics. One interesting goal in connection with solar parks is the objective to support the use of synergies between the preservation of biodiversity and the production of renewable energy. So this can be a possible connection between biodiversity and solar parks, of course. Summing up, today biodiversity is not a topic of minor importance and has to be considered by everyone. By signing the CBD, the Convention on Biological Diversity, Germany and all the other committees committed itself to its implementation under international law. So, but the question is, what is biodiversity? For many people, biodiversity is understood as a diversity of species. So we have different species of, let's say, birds. We have different species of animals, of reptiles, snakes, but it's much more. The term encompasses the entire diversity of life. So we have the genetic diversity in form of molecules and genes, of course, and we have cells and tissues, we have organs, and of course we have individuals like a reptile or like a plant, and we have also habitats, ecosystems, bioregions, and biomes. So this should be all protected, and this is all encompassed by the term biodiversity. So there is an interesting question, and this is why are some areas more diverse than others? This is a complex matter, but an important factor in Europe, at least, is the way land is used. So biodiversity is connected to the land use management. So in Europe today, there is nearly no pristine nature left in Europe. So instead, most of it is a centuries-old, culturally shaped landscape. So our nature depends very much on culture, or there's a connection between culture and nature. And this cultural landscape is habitat of many animals and plants that depend on it. With the following slides, I will give you some background information why solar parks can play an important role in preserving or promoting biodiversity. So the next three slides show a time lapse of changing agricultural landscapes within the last centuries. So the first slide, yeah, here it is, okay. So on the first slide, you can see a typical pre-industrial landscape agricultural landscape with different kind of habitats. So you can see wetlands maybe, so you can see some trees, you can see some vegetables, you can see a meadow, you can see pasture, and so on. So it is diverse in habitats. That's the most crucial points. And what you can see here at the edge of the picture are several animals, like birds or like insects, a ladybird, a butterfly, or a bee, or something like that. And then we have a mammal, a hamster. So they all depend on this kind of landscape, and the diversity of the landscape is reflected by diversity of animals and plants. So pre-industrial landscape, only small amounts of this are left until today. On the following slide, you see minor changes. So some habitats have disappeared, like patches of trees. You remember there was this patch of trees here, and there's only one crop species here. So we have some grain, and we have a river which is slightly corrected right now, and we have a paved path, which you can see here. And very important not to forget, tractors on the scene as a symbol for mechanization. So with the help of mechanization, it was more and more possible to use the agricultural landscape more intensively. So the third picture depicts an intensively cultivated farmland like we all know it from today. A large portion of it is intensively used with the deployment of plant protection products and fertilizers. You can hardly recognize the river. You can see it here. So it is now heavily corrected, and it's changed to a channel, and the diversity of habitats is more or less gone. There are only a few left. So that's the situation for a large part of the agricultural landscape today. The animals here at the edge of the picture are fading away, and this should indicate simply that there is a decrease in biodiversity is going on. So for many animals and plants too, this kind of farmland no longer offers suitable living conditions. So there are decreasing numbers and decreasing species. So what we can see is that there is a connection between land use and biological diversity. For this reason, it's worthwhile to take a look on the distribution of land use in Germany. This can help to explain biodiversity levels and patterns and give hints why some species are decreasing and some species are not. About 20% of the total area in Germany in 2017 are used for settlement, transport, water bodies, and surrounding countryside. So another third, about 30%, is used for forest areas, and with an amount of 50%. Agriculture is the largest land user nationwide. So, since numerous species depend on farmland habitats, it has a correspondingly large influence, of course, of species diversity. So, if we split it up, 60% of this agricultural land is used for the production of fodder crops, 22% for food, and an increasing amount of farmland is under cultivation for energy crops, about 14%. So it's a concentration here, the energy crops, of just a few crop species like maize, sugar beet, and rapeseed. So most of the plants are used for the production of biogas and biofuel. So in 2017, this amounted to about 14% of the arable land. So we have minor areas for industrial crops and wasteland and set aside. So a large portion of this agricultural land is intensively managed with a deployment of plant protection products and fertilizers. And as a negative side effect, adjacent habitats are also affected by this through airborne particles of fertilizers and pesticides. So it's easy to understand that the largest users, so farmland user, has a great influence on plants and animals living in this landscape. So this leads to the causes of the decline of biodiversity, particularly in the agricultural landscape. So it's not always easy to say what are the real causes, because they are often complex and multifaceted, not least because they act and interact over a long time, on periods of time. So nevertheless, on the basis of red lists and relevant studies, some important causes for the widespread decline of many plant and animal species in Germany can be determined. So main three causes are destruction of biotopes, or the structural impoverishment of landscape. Destruction means so we can drain wetlands, for example, or we can plow meadows. And the structural impoverishment is through the removal of hedges or ponds or heaps of stones and things like that. Next important point is over-fertilization with nutrients, especially nitrogen. So that is a problem for certain species which are not adapted to that. And a third point, an important point, is the increasing tendency for agricultural land to be intensified. And on the other hand, there are some areas which are not worth to be used for agriculture, and they are left open, and they are reforested again, which again is nothing which promotes biodiversity. So to give you some impressions of that, I show you a large-scale structural impoverished landscape, which you can see here. So we have a large area planted with one crop, let's say with maize or with corn or whatever. And on the contrary, I show you a picture from South Tyrol with a landscape which is totally different. And it's easy to understand that this kind of landscape is much more diverse and offers much more habitats to many species than the one on the left-hand side. So what is the problem with over-fertilization? So you can see a tractor here bringing out liquid manure, Gülle called in Germany, and this leads to the promotion of a few competitive species, for example, let's say like nettle. So in the presence of the high nutrient levels, low competitive species are on the long run outcompeted, so they have no chance to survive under these conditions. And this leads to a large scale homogenization. So we have not a small scale landscape, but we have a large scale homogenized landscape with living conditions only for a few species. So, and as a consequence, this is a low biodiversity. So a lack of management is also a serious problem for nature conservation and for biodiversity in Europe. So under natural conditions, Europe would be, most parts of Europe would be forested. So if there is no management, the forest is coming back. And you can see this here on the slide, on the picture, that from the forest in the background, pine forest, more and more trees encroaching on the open landscape and changing the conditions, and in not such a long time, sorry, there will be here a forest once again, and the open landscape conditions vanish, and with them all the species. So problem is we have to do a certain kind of management. So two graphs illustrate the dramatic consequences of this development. So the first graph shows the development of bird populations in Germany from 1980 to 2016. So we have a dramatic decline of farm birds. So you can see it here. There is a decline of about 34%, and this corresponds to a loss of 10 million breeding pairs between 1980 and 2016. Interesting enough, that there is conversely the number of birds from other habitats, like forest or wetlands, which increased, mainly due to protective measures, like I'm thinking on species like sea eagle, for example, or osprey or crane. So the next slide shows the development of insects in a famous study. It's called the Krefeld studies. So in a time lapse between 1989 to 2016, you see that there is a dramatic insect decline over time of about 76%. Interesting enough, they collected the biomass of insects in protected areas, so not in normal agricultural landscape, but in protected areas. And as I said, as a negative side effects, maybe all the fertilizer and pesticides and plant protection products are responsible for that. There is a connection between the insect decline and the decline of former birds. And there is a connection between this because 80% of our breeding birds in Germany, and I think that's the same is true for the rest of Europe, they depend on animal protein for raising their offspring. So the connection between the negative situation of populations of formerly more frequent bird species and the decline of insects is therefore not insignificant. So there is a connection between it. Less insects, less birds. Okay, so now I will present the key findings of the study, Solarparks, Profits for Biodiversity. So I do not present the results in detail, but I will focus on some important points. So first of all, what did we do? The goal was to obtain a nationwide comprehensive overview of information on biodiversity in solar farms. So for this purpose, me and my colleagues evaluated reports from all over Germany on the subject, like development plans with the associated preliminary and follow-up investigations. So I'm thinking of environmental reports and monitoring after the respective plans have been built. And in addition, our documents were used as well as specialist literature or scientific studies on this subject. So as a result, the documents for 75 solar parks were examined. So in a process, we qualified them with regard to their suitability, and for a variety of reasons, not all of them were suitable. And due to the lack of data from some federal states in Germany, a nationwide consideration was not possible in the study. So the database did not allow a detailed nationwide assessment of biodiversity within solar farms, but it does allow trends to be identified. So the reason is, in general, ecology is a very complex matter, so that it's not easy to make general statements. But the general findings of the study are that photovoltaic facilities are suitable for promoting biodiversity. Second, sites on which photovoltaic facilities are built usually achieve higher diversity than before. But a crucial point or crucial points are the design and management of solar parks. So in general, the spaces between the module rows should be wide enough to fit the needs of certain species. Equally important is the management. So it's called in ecology an extensive use of grassland with removal of the mown material of the hay. If the mown material is not removed, a dense layer of litter is formed, which is unsuitable for many plant and animal species. So, okay, just to give you an impression, you see on the left-hand side white narrow spacing between the module rows, and it's for the conditions it's more sunny and the light conditions. And on the right-hand side you see a narrow row spacing with shady conditions and different site conditions. So from an ecological point of view, the potential ecological effects are that a wide row spacing goes along with good light conditions, contrary to narrow row spacing with moderate or shady light conditions. So as a result of these conditions, we have strong evaporations. That means for the species living there, they have warm and dry site conditions. And because some of the species, like lizards, sand lizards, for example, depend on it, it's very important to have or to offer this kind of conditions. So on the contrary, we have a low evaporation. That means cool and damp site conditions, which is a problem for some species. So another important finding is that we have a moderate growth on sites with a wide row spacing, and we have a vital growth of the vegetation with narrow row spacing. This can lead to a point which is not a real ecological effect, but an economic effect. So it's possible with a wide row spacing to apply mechanical mowing, and with a narrow row spacing, we very often have to the situation to mow the grass by hand. And this could be an important cost factor. So in general, with a wide row spacing, we have low management costs, and on the other hand, we have high management costs. And in general, there's a higher biodiversity on installations with wide row spacing, contrary to the narrow row spacing with a lower biodiversity. So we have to keep in mind that these are general statements. In detail, it depends on the site conditions of the single solar parks. So we have to find out, are there nutrient poor or nutrient rich soils? Is there a high precipitation or low precipitation? How were the sites used before as a species poor agricultural land or a diverse former military training areas? So these are all points which are crucial for the single installations and for to say if there is a high biodiversity or a low diversity. So if the let me click. Okay, so if the design and management are done properly, solar parks can be profit for biodiversity. So to depict this or to illustrate this, there is a picture from a solar park in Brandenburg in Finoford, and you can see there's a wide row spacing, and as a result of this, we have a bloomy, species-rich grassland with many flowering plants, and in connection to this, with many insects who depend on these flowering plants, and the insects are basically needed for reptiles and for birds. So this is an example for a biodiversity-rich solar park. Mainly, I'm convinced due to the row spacing. So one characteristic breeding bird in Finoford is hoopoe. That's a very, very funny bird, or very characteristic bird. And it's important to know that the colonization of this bird was encouraged by the help of artificial nest for hoopoe. And by this way, the bird's number was increasing in a crucial way. So to sum it up, what are the profits, or why can we solar parks profits for biodiversity? So the main point is that there is not an application of fertilizers and plant protection products like pesticides that differs those places from the agricultural landscape. And we have a preservation of habitats due to the permanent extensive management of grassland and the spaces between the rows. And of course, we have the new establishment of diverse grassland types. So, for example, we can do this by sowing seeds, special seed mixtures, so we can boost up the diversity, the biodiversity of plants easily. That's not very, very complicated. So, and we keep the landscape open, so we avoid reforestation. So you have to know that one of the key problems for Nature Conservancy in Central Europe is to keep the landscape open and to find someone who is managing it in the right way. That means in an extensive way. Very often it is unattractive for farmers, and so they do it in an intensive way, or they leave the landscape open. So that is, from the point of view of nature conservation, catastrophic. So, and we have a low anthropogenic disturbance rate, of course, because the solar installations are fenced and nobody is allowed to go in. So you might, of course, we have a stable long-time habitats due to care and maintenance until at least 20 years or longer. So for Nature Conservancy, this is a very long time. So, and that could be an asset for them and for many species. So you might remember that one goal of the German National Biodiversity Strategy is to support synergies between the preservation of biodiversity. So there is not, okay, synergies between the preservation of biodiversity and the production of renewable energy. So when we see that there is a destruction of biotopes or the structural impoverishment of the landscape is going on, so the synergy effect for solar parks can be a creation and preservation of those structures and biotopes. And if we have an over-fertilization in many parts of Central Europe, so this is not relevant for solar parks because there is simply no need for fertilizers. So it just boosts the management costs if we fertilize the grassland. So that's not something that the operators like to. And the increasing tendency for intensification and leaving land uncultivated is different in solar parks because there is an extensive farming going on. So these can be potential synergy effects between the biodiversity conservation and solar parks. So I will end this presentation and I say many thanks for your attention. And this picture is from a solar park in Rickelshausen, Baden-Württemberg, and it's managed by the help of sheep. Nice picture for me. So thank you for your attention.
Yeah, so thanks, Tim. I think it was a very interesting summary, and again, we are in touch. A few of our associations members are very deeply in touch with you. And let's face also the situation. I mean, you visited a few of our sites, and from time to time, you had some wrinkling of your eyes because you've seen that a lot of companies, and let's be also open. Also, we try to focus completely on the yield. Yeah, I mentioned before, ground coverage ratio is a main topic for us. But on the other hand, we are getting also some, I would say, requests or even very clearly demand on compensation measures inside the building permits. And this happens now more and more, not only in Germany, but also in other countries. So I've seen already a few questions here. A few are quite specific, so let us move into it. One question was related to grass management. Do you recommend to do it actively or passively? So is it really important to cut it and then to leave it, or to let it really grow and only cut it on their areas where potential shading of modules can happen?
Yeah, it depends very much on the goals. And as I said, every single solar park is a single one, which means we have different site conditions there, and we have maybe different goals for nature conservation. So first of all, we have to formulate goals. So what is the goal when cutting the grassland, or when leaving it without cutting, and what kind of species do we want to promote? And there are certain things which we have to take into account. And so there is, it's not easy to give a general answer to your question. So you have to have an expert like me, for example, and you have to ask me or Peschel or other biologists who know what is to do. And you always have to have goals. What do we want to promote? What is our goal when we do this and that? And then you can check if the goals are reached or achieved or not, and then you can counteract or not. So this is in general something I can recommend to you.
Yeah, okay, so this is what we also faced when we contacted you, that every plant and every site has some special conditions. I think a few areas are on old military airports where it's probably easier to leave everything as it is for the next 10 years and then to start some activities. And a few areas are really on I would say, quite good conversion land where you can do really a lot of things. A few questions came also a bit how you and, let's say, finally also we are working together with the local authorities. So is it, especially in Germany or in other countries, is it a must that we have to integrate someone like you? And the other question was, how let's say, do you speak the same language like the people from the nature conservation authorities?
Yeah. Yeah, so it's a new topic. I mean, it's a new topic for everyone and also for the authorities. So many don't know about the connection between biodiversity and solar parks, and many say, okay, this is a technical installation. It's got nothing to do with nature conservation, and it's got nothing to do with biodiversity. So what we have to do, we have to inform the people, and we have to show them what is going on the place and on the scene. And we have to tell the people that it is a great possibility for nature conservancy, and it's a great possibility for the promotion of biodiversity to take solar parks into consideration as means of means to promote biodiversity. So in some parts of Brandenburg or in some parts of Bavaria, the authorities they know that this could be a good point from their point of view, and that there don't have to be compensation measures, for example, outside the installations. But in many other parts, they just say, no, there is no connection, and no, there is no positive effect on the species and on biodiversity. So once again, important point, inform the people and do good and tell about it. So, and also it's very important from my point of view that we have to inform the public of this thing, because nearly nobody knows about it, mainly due to the fact that many of the solar parks are fenced and nobody can go inside. So most important point, we have to promote all this stuff.
Yeah, and this is what we both and the BNE are doing at the moment. We prepared also a small movie which we just launched, and we can also add it here probably as a link into it. So it's quite interesting. It's a 3-minute movie which is in German, but on the other hand, we translate it into English and presents a bit the local situation. I think it's a very emotional film, and it comes always back to the topic which you mentioned. We have to spread the idea, and we have to bring the concept to the people. A few questions were also related again to policies. Do you, beside Germany, where at the moment I personally feel the topic diversity is quite visible, so the relation to PV probably not so much. What is your impression when you look a bit in the other countries around Germany? Do you see some activities now on the EU, for example, on the new agricultural initiatives? Is biodiversity and photovoltaic somehow already named and linked?
Difficult to say. You know, it's a contentious issue if the new EU initiative bringing back nature will be successful or not, and a lot of things depend on the kind of farming. And but I think that the awareness that we have to do something, and that we have to do it in an unconventional way from the point of view from today, is more and more raising. And so there's a good chance for you as a solar park operator to profit from the situation in a way that you can convince the people and convince the authorities and convince nature conservationists that you are doing something good, and that this is an advantage for all of us. So I'm not very well informed about the other countries of the EU, what is going on there. But I think there's a strong movement, of course, in England, for example, and they're doing a lot of things. And I think the next point we have to do is, from my side, to connect those people in England to get some more information what they are doing there.
Okay, a few questions was also related not to the when we design the system, so it's more on existing plans. Are there any measures, any activities where companies like us who build the plans quite close together, which we can do afterwards? So is there any concept, any idea where we can bring the biodiversity probably into plans which are already up and running?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, one of the most important points is the scientific monitoring, and this is to see what is going on concerning certain species. So are the measures are successful, which were implemented for birds or for lizards or for plants, or are not? And do we have to counteract? Do we have to change our mowing regime maybe? And so this is one crucial point. And so ask or use the expertise and ask the people who know what is to do.
Mm-hmm. So I think we had a few discussions in also our team, and I think we also started to integrate you. But what do you think, for example? I mean, there are, correct me if I'm wrong, there are boxes which are specialized for wild bees so that they can find places and you can hook it underneath the frame afterwards. Or for example, to bring some additional seeds directly at the fence where you have whatever, a wild flower area. Is this only nice or is it effective?
Both. So,
Okay.
but yeah, once again, it depends very much on the site conditions and where the solar park is situated. So we have specialists which are able to say, okay, in this case, it makes sense, and you have to do this and that because several of the, for example, wild bee species are connected to certain plants, so you have to have those plants and you have to seed them out maybe. And so once again, it depends very, very much where a solar park is situated. For example, in Schleswig-Holstein, the situation is very different from Baden-Württemberg or Bavaria or from Brandenburg. So an expert have to say if this makes sense or not.
Okay, good.
There's no rule. this is the maybe tricky part of it. So it's very difficult to make generalizations concerning biodiversity and measures of or things to promote biodiversity, because everything depends very much on the single spot where we are what we are talking about. So we have a solar installation in Brandenburg. Once again, it's totally different from a solar installation in Baden-Württemberg, and so we have to deal with the site conditions and with the conditions that are important for certain species, and then we can decide we can do this and that makes sense, and that doesn't make any sense. So it's yeah, that's it.
I mean, a question also was related now to the last picture which we just seen, the sheeps in the field. I mean, this is for us as the operator, an asset owner of a plant, the easiest thing what we can do. But is this only nice, or is there a real tangible, measurable effect behind it?
Yeah, once again, it depends on the density of sheep maybe, and it depends on how long they are on certain areas of the solar park, and it depends on the goal. Do you want to promote certain insects, certain plants, or do you want to do some public relation work, for example? So it can be nice and it can be good to boost the acceptance of certain solar parks, because people see sheep and they say, oh, that's really nice. It's like in a nice landscape, and maybe we have a shepherd. And so once again, difficult to generalize, and in general, it can be a good idea, but we have to see the certain conditions of the site.
Good. Okay, good. Yeah, thanks a lot, Tim. I think we are coming now to an end. I think for us it is always interesting to look into this. And again, as I mentioned before, a lot of our players in the market are quite commercial orientated, but it's always nice to see and to feel also that we can do a bit more than only generating green energy. So beside this green energy production, what I learned now is also for us, on one hand, we have to integrate people like you in an early stage to find some ideas, but I also learned these ideas are very often specific solution for this particular area. So for sure, we can say sheep are generally okay, but on the other hand, the sheep also has to find some grass to eat. So on the other hand, I see also a great opportunity now in this situation that we can analyze with you and with our operational guys and the team systems afterwards. So I think when we look back a bit into the history in whatever 2005 up to 10 or 15, and generally we built the plans with a very wide distance, and this is I think what you also have seen on our plans, because the investment was much higher. We were very technical orientated in the design of the system. But on the other hand, we are moving ahead, and I think our decision about the distance between the rows, for example, which are more in our hand than in the permitting process, is very often related to numbers, to yield numbers. And this is, I think, where we all have to work on it now. So we have to see all this from a different perspective. So, and I'm really happy that we initiated this this study and also this webinar now. So, and I'm really looking forward to I would say to have a further exchange. Yeah, I would like to hand over then to Alfonso again. So I think Alfonso mentioned that the presentation will be shared. Also, people can download it. And I think the interesting thing is really one thing to get in touch with you for sure if there are further questions coming up, and on the other hand also to spread the idea. Spread the idea means in general the film which we prepared, or the presentation, or talking to people in the permitting process, and especially when we are sitting also in front of the communities that we speak about biodiversity and photovoltaic. And I think this should be our aim and our goal, so that we can really be not only the good guys from the industrial point of view, we are also the good guys and participate on the biodiversity activity in general. Good. Yeah, Tim, thanks a lot. I think it was a great intro, and I think a lot of additional information are coming soon also now in the scene. So please take care of the biodiversity word, and hopefully we get it very often together in the same sentence with photovoltaic. Good.
Oh, thanks a lot.
So thanks a lot. I would like over to Solarplaza again for the final sentence, Alfonso. So thanks a lot.
Perfect. Thank you both of you, Stefan and Tim, for this lively discussion. An important thing you mentioned there at the end, Tim, and Stefan was also alluding to it, the importance of just having people be aware of this. And of course, at Solarplaza, that is kind of what we try to do. Stefan, you mentioned the B&E video in German with English subtitles. That will be made available as well, ideally on the slides with a link, but also on our website in the webinar section, you'll be able to access the recordings as well as this new video. So it's something that is worth sharing. To share, as you were both mentioning, it's important to spread the word. From my side then, a couple of final announcements. It's just our upcoming events. We were discussing, the importance of sharing these topics. Topics similar to this are going to be shared in Solar Asset Management North America and in early November. Solar Asset Management Australia will be a journey that will last all of November. Our floating solar conference, which I think, not in this case, we're not discussing biodiversity, but it does open the field to be discussed in the future, since it relates to the biodiversity in a marine environment. And of course, relating to this event, Solar Asset Management Europe, the platform opens the 2nd of November and will be open all of November. That is it from my side as well. Once more, I would like to thank Tim and Stefan for this engaging Q&A session, and of course your very informative presentation, Tim. I would like to remind the attendees once more that the slides will be made available, and the link to both the recordings and the B&E video will be available on our website as well. And after that, thanks so much for everyone for being here. I mean, there's many questions that we didn't have a chance to answer, but I mean, that's a good opportunity to reach out to Stefan or to Tim as well and discuss this in more detail.
Good.
Thank you very much, both of you.
Thank you very much.
See you.
Goodbye.
Bye.